Welcome to Type Tune Tint. I'm Tom Kranz. Are you the best version of yourself? Is there another version you wish had never existed? Author Jeffrey Ashkin creates a character who confronts his worst self in his new novel, The Second Life of Jonathan Sendel. It's a sci-fi send-up in a late 21st century world where clones are created to solve the murders of their original selves. In this story, however, the clone finds out his original self was not the person he thought he was. And I'm joined by Jeffrey Ashkin from his, I was going to say your palatial estate in Los Angeles, but you're actually at work, aren't you?
Yep, that's right.
That's cool. You squeezed me in before you started working today. You're a teacher in Los Angeles, correct?
That is correct.
We're here on the occasion of the publishing of your first book, The Second Life of Jonathan Sendel. And this is a book that, as I told you, drew me right in. I mean, within the first 5 pages, I was hooked. And I'm a science fiction fan, and I've written some sci-fi. So we'll talk about, what your inspiration was for that and when you started and how long it took you to do all that. But I'm interested, first of all, in the fact that you're a teacher, a public school teacher in Los Angeles, right? So here's a nice broad question for you. What's that like?
I have to say, it's very inspiring. I liked what I teach. I teach special education, and the students I have are very motivated to be here for the most part. And I really enjoy teaching. It's something that I was drawn to. My mom was a special ed teacher for many years. Actually, all my brother and my parents, all three of them are in education, and it's just something that I felt very comfortable with. So I went into it thinking to myself, okay, was trying to make it in the film industry, wasn't quite becoming a steady gig for me. So I thought that teaching was, once again, something that could be very inspiring, helping students go on to success. And then also it would be a steady gig. And it has been. So it's been really nice. But it's, of course, it's tough to balance sometimes, doing lesson planning, and I have 2 kids at home. So that can be difficult. But it's been very rewarding. And in fact, I have to say, it's a very, very heartwarming experience when someone tells you, and I don't mean to brag, but I had a couple of students tell me I was their favorite teacher, which I have to say, I was very happy to hear. Well,
that's very cool. So, I mean, everybody I interview on this podcast has some kind of a day job, but this sounds like it's more than a day job. This sounds like it's a career, it's an avocation, it's something you actually love doing.
Exactly, yeah. I have to say, it's been quite a journey. I didn't come to this lightly. I really came to it later in my life. I don't know, it sounds weird, but I would say that I came to it after about good 13 years of trying to be in the film industry and have various jobs and everything. But when I got to the teaching, it just seemed like a good fit for me. But of course, I still love writing, I still love acting, and I enjoy knowing that at least I have something steady and something I believe in, but also like to pursue those interests, at least without having to worry that, if I don't get this gig, I can't eat for a week.
Well, we'll talk about some of those early interests of yours. I did when I went to your YouTube channel and I dug up your films, technical support, your cool little film out of film school, and some of the other short things you did. You did them quite a while ago, right? I mean, we're talking 10 years ago or more.
Yeah, I came out to Los Angeles in 2006. I went to film school from the went to film school in University of Central Florida. And after that, after graduating from Florida, I decided to come out to Los Angeles. And I struggled to kind of figure out what I wanted to do in terms of, do I want to go straight for writing? Do I want to be like an independent filmmaker? What do I want to do? And I promised myself I would never do anything that was not film related. I came out to LA. I'm going to do this just be in the film industry. And I was taking acting classes and writing classes and doing improv classes and just everything I could possibly do. And I feel like I maybe should have narrowed my focus into something specific, but I never quite did. So I ended up trying to basically focus on making something that I wanted to do. And that's when I started making films on my own, because I figured, okay, I love acting, I love writing, and I like making something that is very personal to me. So that's when I ended up doing technical support, which was my first real success in Los Angeles. I got people together that were really talented, and I was like, oh, great, I could get myself my own starring role. And it came out really well. I really liked the way that came out. I got some offers to put it on a website. I had some high-profile people take a look at it. got in some really high profile festivals. So it was a really heartwarming experience. I'm like, okay, I can do this. Of course, I have to do it a certain way in order to make something happen, but at least it gave me the confidence to continue on making projects on my own. So
So what he's talking about is a short film called Technical Support, which is on YouTube.
yes.
You just search Technical Support Jeffrey Ashkin, and it comes right up.
We're sorry, the number you have reached is not in service. Please check the number or try your call again.
I'd like to be let out now.
That's not how it works.
I don't care how it works. I didn't volunteer for this.
Actually, you did. We have full authority to keep you as long as we want.
So I'm a prisoner.
I wouldn't use that kind of language.
It's kind of a sci-fi thing. It had a lot of the themes, I thought, of your book. Somebody else is controlling me. Who am I really? Am I a real person? And that's kind of one of the themes or the main theme of the Jonathan Sendel book. But you're right. It's very professional. The actors all look like this does not look like a high school or college acting class. This looks like real people, and the production values are good. And so that was like your first film, and then you followed that up with, or maybe the the Jeff Show films that they come later after that, the shorter
Yeah.
films.
Yeah, so after the Action Support came out, I realized that even though I enjoyed it a lot, I really had a lot of fun. I really felt very drawn to comedy. So I figured, okay, well, what kind of thing can I do that would be comedic? So I did another short film that was a comedy. It didn't really go too many places. It was called Got Your Message. It was silent film, and everyone was on their phone. The text messages were the silent film interstitials, and that didn't quite pick up as much steam as I would have liked. So I'm like, okay, what was really popular at the time? In 2014, I noticed there was a lot of web series that I thought were really getting a lot of views and everything. So I thought, okay, well, I could do that. I would film a bunch of sketches on one day, and then I'd release them throughout the year. So that's what I ended up doing. And the Jeff Show was something that I, once again, did on my own, produced. I used my own apartment, got actors that I thought were great. It's so funny because like there's an actor that was in the show called Jeff Bratz, also named Jeff. It was kind of funny. It's called The Jeff Show, and it starred me and another guy named Jeff. And it was filmed, and my DP his name was James Jeffrey. So it's kind of funny that there was a lot of Jeffs in The Jeff Show. So it really was very accurate. Anyway, but the show was like a series of sketches that were somewhat interconnected. Some were one-offs. And I actually took inspiration from Key and Peele, because sometimes they play like people who know each other. Sometimes they play characters, and that was kind of like my inspiration for it. And it did pretty well. Got in some festivals, got me some attention, and then it didn't quite end up becoming something that got sold to a major network and went on to fame and fortune. But once again, it did give me a lot of confidence in myself and my work. I got a lot of great responses from people. I was very lucky to get a lot of people around me to want to help and make that a fun time. And I really enjoyed that. It was probably one of my favorite things I did out here, actually, in Los Angeles.
Well, I admire the fact that you actually went out and you actually tried to do all this stuff. It's like you threw a lot of stuff against the wall to see what would stick, basically.
Yep.
Tried a lot of different things, as opposed to me. I'm so I've got an ego the size of a barn, and I hate criticism, because I'm still basically a 12-year-old boy. So, I'm just sitting here dreaming that some Netflix producer is going to read one of my books one day and call me out of the blue and say, I want to produce your show. And of course, that's never going to happen. And you are exhibit A of somebody who actually worked your ass off to try to get this and showed that it doesn't just happen. You have to actually work on it. You also said something in an email to me that I found surprising, which was, you have this feeling that they're looking for youth in, creativity and creative people. Talk more a little bit about that. What makes you say that?
Well, I find that I don't know what it is. There's certainly a vibe to it. I see it more with actors than with writers, but there's this mystique that you get when you have a success at a very early age, like in your 20s. Like you have either a song or a book, and he's only 21 and she's only 23. And it's like, okay, what does that have to do with anything? Like, so they got success at a young age. Why is that something we even talking about? And there's something about it that is more magical, because it's like, it's the exception. You didn't put in all those years and years and years of time into your work, or supposedly. There's this image that people have, a lot of people have. Now, this is anecdotal, of course, so I can't speak for everyone. I can speak for my own experiences, of course. But when you have a show that talks about someone's journey into becoming a writer or an actor, they don't get into the very nitty-gritty details of how they made it. They basically say like, okay, so and so went from somewhere in America and they moved to LA and they ended up making it because they worked really hard and they got an agent and all of a sudden it's really not that simple. It's very specific and everyone's journey is specific and it usually ends up becoming something like this. I went to LA, I was in acting class, I asked a friend, hey, I wish I had an agent. And my friend was like, hey, I'll give you my agent. Or I was in a studio as a page and someone was on a show and said, I need to hire someone. I'll hire you. It's really, that is actually the part where they get to the next level.
So it's much more granular than the kind of the cliche that you just kind of go find fame and fortune like that.
Exactly. And I think that's hard to articulate in a show or a movie. It's hard. I think there's this impression that people aren't really interested in that, the general public. But of course, people like me, and I'm sure people like you, are really interested in how did you quite become from, the normal world into the fame and fortune world? How did you get from here to there? And I think it's very specific. And like I said, there's a lot more details than people are able to see. So going back to your point about, I think the thing about me, and this is something that I've noticed, one of the reasons why I'm willing to try so much is that I found that I could do stuff on my own without having to wait for permission from people. I never did I tried doing GoFundMe a little bit, didn't quite work, but I never quite waited for money to come in. I would budget it out with my own money, found out what my variables were that I knew I had. I have an apartment, I have a DP, I have these actors, I have these things that I can use to my advantage. I don't have to ask permission for anybody. I don't have to wait for money. All I have to do is just schedule these people and I can make a project. And it actually helped me as a writer because I figured out, okay, do I really need this? Do I really need that? I can cut this, I can cut that. And I think that a lot of people will say, oh, never use your own money. If you're going to produce something, never use your own money. You're going to go broke. And I'm like, actually, tell you the truth, I would recommend sometimes if it's a small budget and you know you won't go broke, use your own money because that actually makes you realize what you can cut and what's not necessary. It's your money. You'll be more careful about it.
It sounds to me like you're talking about control and having control over your own creative life. And you used a word that comes up constantly in this podcast, which is giving yourself permission to do something. I've talked to artists and writers who, some of them came to their art, whatever it was, later in life because they never thought they had permission to draw, to sit down and, pound something out on a keyboard. And isn't it funny how you have to do that? You have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, you can do that. Who are you waiting for? So good for you. I just find that to be a really common theme here. So you talk about your acting life. There's this you had this prescient moment in Grey's Anatomy where you have this fantastic role as a patient in a hospital. And first we have you lying in bed and then we have you walking a walker. What was that experience like? And did you do any other acting stuff that we would know?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the gigs that I got out here, which I was very happy with, was doing background work, extra work, being in the background of movies and TV shows. And I signed up with a lot of background companies. And some of them, surprisingly, are not just people in the background, they actually put you in the foreground. And this actually was really a background gig, but was not a background gig. I was pretty featured. I had a character name and I was integral to the plot. But it was something that I was very happy to do. Grey's Anatomy was a great set, great people. Everyone's so friendly. No one treats you as if you're beneath them. And some sets, I would say, like there's kind of there's a hierarchy there. But on Grey's Anatomy, everyone was so sweet and very. Ellen Pompeo introduced herself to me, and so did the main actors. I was like, wow, this is really nice. And I had a great time, and I was very happy to be a part of a show that big and not have to have any lines. I just like, all right, I can just be here, be a part of the plot, and just kind of observe, not to memorize anything. And it was nice.
It's cool. I was impressed. Hey, must have been a cool thing. Was that like a day's work? I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was a day's work, and they shot all my scenes in one day, so that was great. I will say though, I for my students, and they love this, is I kind of sometimes I treat them to some of my other work if they've been good and they've been paying attention to the lesson. I'm like, okay, you guys can see me in Iron Man. So I appear in the first MCU movie, Iron Man.
Really?
I tell them the story about Iron Man, of course, and it was my first movie that I was in. I'm in the very last shot where he's doing the press conference. I'm in the very front row, and I'm taking pictures, and you can see me right in the front. And they go, "Oh, it's so cool to get a chance to meet Robert Downey Jr." I said, "No," but he did smile at me, and I smiled back, and So yeah, I enjoy doing acting. I never quite got a starring role or co-starring role, but I do have a great agent, Jake Flaherty. About.
So even though you're teaching school, you still have an agent and you're still open to doing that stuff. If
Yeah,
your phone rings, you would, and it
yeah.
fits in with, your bigger life, you would certainly do that.
Yes, I'm very happy with that. I'm very happy with my agent and my headshots, which I got from Sage Kirkpatrick. She would love to give a shout out as well because I think though that there is a chance for me to still make it in the industry, but of course, I do love writing and that's why I wrote this novel.
All right. So we're going to talk more about The Second Life of Jonathan Sendel, your really great sci-fi book. And we will be back shortly with Jeff Ashkin. Don't go away. We're back with Jeffrey Ashkin, actor, film producer, public school teacher in Los Angeles. All things that he apparently does well and that he's pretty proud of. We're going to talk more now about The Second Life of Jonathan Sendel. This is Jeff's first book. It's a novel, it's sci-fi. But I'm happy to say that you don't have to be a sci-fi geek to enjoy this book. I think this book really appeals to a wide audience because there's not a lot of ray guns and space travel in there. The basic sci-fi premise is cloning, and I'm not going to give too much away, but the basic synopsis here is that this guy wakes up in what's tantamount to a hospital one day, covered with pink slime, and he realizes that he is a clone. And he is a clone of a guy who was murdered. And the whole premise here is that when people are murdered in 2080, it takes place in our century, which I love. They make clones of the dead people to try to help the police solve the crime. Who murdered the real guy? And that's kind of the beginning. And then there's a bunch of different twists and turns. And as I said, it really sucked me in. So you told me that this started out as a screenplay, but then you decided to make it into a novel. Tell me about that process.
Well, thank you. That was a great. That was a great summary too. I would say that I first had the idea at a screenplay a couple of years ago, and it was something that I thought would be really a lot of fun as a script, and I wrote it basically to be a spec screenplay, which is basically, one of those types of screenplays you write when you want to sell it on spec, and here's the whole story, here you go. And it got some people to read it, and some people around town told me that it was pretty good, but wasn't what they're looking for at the time. So I had a couple people who are producers, and they were interested in producing themselves, and they try to get talent attached, but they said to me, you know what, why don't you try making it a novel? Maybe it'll be easier to sell as a novel. So I said, okay. And I started looking at it. And honestly, the process of turning from a screenplay to a novel wasn't very difficult.
Hmm.
I really had a lot of ideas that I hadn't even put in the screenplay to expand it. So it was very fun to kind of add those elements back in that I wasn't able to do in a screenplay. Because, a screenplay has to be about roughly 2 hours, and a novel could be however lengthy you want it to be.
Sure.
So it was fun to kind of expand it, and then actually it's funny, rearrange things because there's certain elements that I wanted to change around. And when you mentioned the sci-fi element, I like sci-fi that's more on the idea of twisting something that is kind of something you couldn't do in normal drama,
Mhm.
like the Twilight Zone episodes. They're not really about aliens and you know, you know, crazy things, but they are about that. But it's more about the human behavior behind it. I like to say that my novel is science fiction with like a lowercase s.
Well,
It's
one of the things that kept me reading was that even though your main protagonist is a clone, and I put those in quotes because he was actually created as a much better version of his real self, which is, part of the subtext of the show, but he has a personality and he's got vulnerabilities and he's like a human being. And that I found when I rate my sci-fi books, those books have to be about people. They can't just be about ray guns and about,
right.
aliens and about they have to be about people because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for ourselves in these characters and we're looking for vulnerabilities. And I found that to be the case. So when you wrote the screenplay, did that just come to you one night, or did you write that after you did technical support, which is kind of the same theme as, am I the real person or did somebody create me?
I was always interested in cloning because I love the idea of the nature versus nurture idea, where someone lived a certain way and came out a certain way, and another person had the same exact DNA and came out a completely different way. And then actually, when the Me Too movement happened, I was fascinated to learn about these people that I admired, and I found that there was a public persona that we were aware of, and then there was a private persona that
Sure.
was toxic. And I really was fascinated to learn about how someone could appear to be so clean cut and honest, but then really they were toxic. And I wanted to explore that in a novel. So I thought, okay, I can combine my cloning idea with this idea about someone being not on the up and up. And I thought that it would be great to explore that. So that's where it came from. I think a lot of people see themselves as the victim rather than the aggressor. I think a lot of people don't understand that. Sometimes if you look back on your life, you might think, well, I could have been better at that moment. I could have been a little, and I think we're so used to, not say we, but we think about people who have hurt us, but not so much how we've hurt other people. And this book was really trying to tackle, if we are a celebrity, you have this relationship with people you don't even know, and you don't people have a relationship with you don't even know, and you don't realize how you've inspired someone based on what you're doing, even though you may have never met this person. We all have our own heroes and people we never met, maybe people from the past, people we think would be our friends, people we think we admire. And then you meet them and you're like, oh, wow, you're not what I thought you were. And it was like, never meet your own heroes, right? And I think it's great to meet your own heroes. There's certain people that I love meeting, and I was like, wow, you're just exactly who I thought you were going to be. And I love that. And then the people you meet are like, oh, this wasn't this wasn't a great meeting.
Well, for those people out there listening, this is very relevant to the book because the clone, Jonathan, he wakes up and he slowly starts remembering that he's a celebrity. He writes this series of books, but he also, and I'm not going to give away too much here, but I mean, this is what grabbed me when he starts to realize that his real self, who he was cloned from, is not a good person. And that there's all these little things and then some pretty big things that he starts learning about his real self. Yet he is not that person now. He's been cloned. And I guess I never really totally recognized why Nolan created him as a much better person than the person he really was. But it works for the book because, you get to like Jonathan the clone. You get to you're rooting for him. You want him to win at the end. So, but the whole idea of looking at our better self and ourself as who is the real me and who's, he's looking at the real him and he doesn't like what he sees. And I wonder how many of us actually can do that, looking back at our own history, looking even in the mirror and saying, was I just an asshole and I just didn't know it? And, if I was, would somebody have told me? Am I kind of like, I'm scratching this a little bit here, but I think that's what you're saying.
There's this idea that you could possibly biologically live forever, if you really wanted to. And I think that, cloning could be a way. I think there's other methods, of course, but should you live forever? And would a clone have any connection to the person? Like if I'm here and you're there and I have your memories, does that mean I'm you? Does that, and one of the things that, I don't give away too much either, but do I have shoulder any responsibility for something that happened to the other person.
Right.
In the story, I believe there's a line that says, he says, it's like watching someone's home movies in my head.
Yeah.
And I think that he starts, and you can see in the story, he starts to kind of distance himself from the memories of this other person because he's not that person. And I think that's one of the things that I was fascinated by is just because you have the memory of someone else doesn't mean you're that person. That's
Sure.
all.
Well, even when you are yourself, you kind of, as we said before, you kind of look back and say, when I did this to this person, or when I said this, was that really me talking, or wasn't that really me talking? I don't know. A lot of good questions come up, and I think that's what makes the book so good. And there are some really unexpected twists in the story. A lot of them happen like in the last 1/3. Again, I don't want to give them away, but as I said, it propelled me all the way through to the end, and I really appreciate the work that went into this and kind of the imagination. How long did it actually? So I like to ask about your writing process, your process for writing either the screenplay or the novel or both. Do you like sit down in a room and turn off all the lights and sit at your computer, or do you bark notes into your iPhone when you're stopped at a red light, or how do you physically actually create the work?
It's funny. I know people who have told me that you got to have a set regimen. You got to wake up and you write 5 hours. I'm like, I don't know who does that. I don't
I
know
don't either.
how that's possible. I write when I can. I write sometimes when I'm inspired. Sometimes I'll write when I'm not inspired, and it'll come to me as I'm writing. Sometimes I'll be looking at something I've already written and be like, oh, let me get rid of this. Let me rewrite this. And it just depends. It depends on sometimes time of day. Sometimes I'll be watching something and I'll be like, oh, wait, I had a good idea. Like sometimes it's weird. I'll be watching something I think is incredibly boring, and it might be like, oh man, this is so boring. Oh, I have a great idea for my novel. And then I'll start writing that. It's a matter of a mixture of free time and when I can get time.
Well, it's a
And
dynamic process. It's ongoing. It fits into your whole life, basically. Did you do like a written outline, or did you know a beginning and middle and end, and did you know how the thing was going to end, or did you just start one day and decide the story will go where it goes?
I did an outline for the screenplay. And after I wrote the outline, I started to write the script. But after I wrote the script, and as I told you, the process of as it did in the novel, I had realized the outline wasn't enough for the novel. So it's very like this is something I feel like I never really was taught either, where you have an outline and you have your script, and they go back and forth.
Hmm.
And then you write a little bit of the novel, and you go back to the outline, and you change the outline, and you go back to the novel, and you rewrite that, you rewrite this, you rewrite that, you rewrite this. It's not like outline novel. It's more like back and forth. And that's actually what happened with me is I went back and forth. It wasn't just a linear process. It was very nonlinear. And a lot of the novel came from a lot of the latter part of the novel, as you mentioned, a lot of the twists and stuff came from, well, I had an outline, I had an ending, and I felt like, okay, well, there's another ending I could put on top of this. And that's what I ended up doing is having an additional outline just for the ending, just for like the last portion of
But
it.
that came to you in the process, right? You got there
Towards
and
the end,
said, I'm
though.
going to do this now.
Yeah, but towards the end, though, like I was ready to have it end a certain way, and then I decided that it would be much more interesting to have it end another way. And it didn't change the course of the novel's trajectory.
Yeah.
It just ended up, I think, having more of an interesting impact toward the end. So basically, yeah, it was something that basically I was editing it up until the published date.
I've never done an outline. I have no attention span whatsoever. So, even doing these podcasts, if I go more than a half hour, I'm gone. This is why I was such an underachiever in college. Me and my 2.76 grade point average, I couldn't sit still during classes. So I really enjoy the process of sitting down with an idea and then just writing and then watching where those characters go. Your book is available on Amazon. Are you selling it anyplace else, or is that your primary platform?
Yeah, we have it on Barnes& and Noble. You can
Okay.
look up, it's going to be in stores in Barnes& and Noble very soon. You can also get it on Barnes& and Noble, the website. It's at Sonny's Bookshop in Encino if you're in the LA area.
Did you have like a traditional publisher here, or did you self-publish this, or was it a hybrid, or what?
Yeah. I have to say, like, my publisher, also from New Jersey. It's Inksmith Publishing, run by Corinne Anderson. She's great. She's been very instrumental in getting this book out there. She got the cover art. and she helped me rewrite. And it's so funny. Like I don't know any of the writers who went through this process in terms of editing, but I went through it with her, and I literally deleted one of my own chapters because I'm like, it's not necessary. And I don't think that happens very often. I just kind of like, I wanted the story to really kind of move fast, and I felt like there was one chapter that just kind of was like backstory. And I'm like, this is really moving the story forward. So I'm like, yeah, out it goes. But anyway, but yeah, so great publisher based in New Jersey. She is a small independent publisher. Got some great books on the website, so I got to make sure to mention her and her excellent company.
Coolly. And you have socials. What are your socials? If you could just kind of reel them off for me.
Sure. I'm on Facebook as Jeffrey Ashkin. I'm on Instagram, also Jeffrey Ashkin. I'm on Threads. I'm on Blue Sky now. I know that just popped up. And
you have a YouTube channel also.
I do have youtube.com/Jeffrey Ashkin. If you want to see any of my films, you can see the Jeff Show web series episodes. You can see some of my animated films that I did, which I even mentioned. I can't believe I didn't say that. Wow. Anyway, but yeah, all that stuff is on my YouTube channel. You can also see some commercials I made for the book as well. Some fake medical commercials.
Oh yeah, I saw one there.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, you got lots of creative juices going there. I love that. That's great. So and now you have to go teach kids, right?
Yes, I do. Actually, I got to start my lesson. I have a lesson plan for today. I got to start my lesson plan. Like, no, I do have a lesson plan. I just got to go make sure I get my room ready to teach math and science now.
Well, go do it. I really appreciate you squeezing me in before you teach, our young leaders of tomorrow here. Jeffrey Ashkin, the author of The Second Life of Jonathan Sendel, and watch for him in, let's see, Iron Man, a rerun of Grey's Anatomy, and here and there, and maybe we'll see you do more stuff. But for right now, your writing is great. We'll look for you on TV and in the movies. And Jeff Ashkin, thanks so much for joining me, and go do that teaching thing.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.